Hello, 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 and welcome to episode number 15 of the Wonder of Stuff vodcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend on a Sunday night. This is the place where you'll find news, information, and commentary on science, engineering, and technology from the past week and beyond, and anything else that interests us from inside our little brains. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and to help us out on this road to knowledge, I'm going to introduce my friends in tech. Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Jolly good, jolly good. So, without further ado, we'll get started and straight on to the topics for this evening. The first one is Ross, and is about when is a planet not a planet when it's a dwarf planet.
Well, yes, indeed. So this is actually about something, a spacecraft called the Dawn spacecraft. Which is a NASA mission, which was launched in 2007, and it has just gone into orbit around an object called Ceres. Now, this is the largest object in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and it was discovered in 1800, I think. And when it was first discovered, they thought it was a planet, and then they decided it was an asteroid, and then later they decided it was a dwarf planet. So it's a dwarf planet. Now, a dwarf planet is basically something that's big enough to have enough gravity to be round, effectively, so it looks like a planet. So it's massive enough for that. But it hasn't actually sort of cleared its orbit. It's orbiting around the sun, but it hasn't cleared its orbit, so it's in the asteroid belt. So yeah, it's the largest dwarf planet we've got.
So where does it fit in the whole grand scheme of things, or from the sun, where in the whole scheme of the planets?
It's between Mars and Jupiter.
Mars and Jupiter, right.
Yeah. And the Dawn spacecraft, it did visit another object, which I can't remember the name of, but yeah, it's just gone into orbit around Ceres. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this mission. One of the first ones is Dawn's propulsion system. It uses something out of sci-fi. It uses an ion propulsion system. So it's actually accelerating particles of xenon, I think it is. So it's ionizing it and firing it out. That's what's actually propelling it. So it's got an ion drive.
Very Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The other interesting thing is actually about Ceres itself. Now, as they've took photos of Ceres, they've noticed a few odd things. And I've got a couple of photos that I want to show you because it's very interesting. Let me have a look. I share my screen. And then go.
So this is... right. Okay.
So
yeah.
What you'll see here, this is a time-lapse of some pictures as the spacecraft was approaching. Now, what you'll notice up here...
Big white spot thing.
Big white spot thing. So there's basically something that's highly reflective on the surface. And there's another photo which again shows it. So basically within a crater here you can see a big white spot.
Well, two of them really.
Two of them, yeah.
Unless one's... Yeah.
Exactly. So they're trying to work out what these are. Now obviously the immediate thing is alien bases. But we don't think...
Whoa!
we don't think that's true. So basically, I think the current thoughts are that it's volcanic. So it's basically it looks really white on the pictures, but it's relative to the surrounding surface. Now it's So
what I heard was that they think something has crashed into it and taken the top layer off.
Well, it could be ice. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, because they think that actually there might be liquid under the surface as well. So there's a couple of thoughts that it could be that, or it could be some sort of volcanic thing where something's actually protruding out. So it's new sort of matter underneath it. But hopefully what we'll get is some better photos as it comes around. Now, obviously, it's just gone into orbit, but there's a period where it actually, it has to sort of catapult round and actually get into a stable orbit, and then we should start getting some really interesting photos from it. And I've lost my thing. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to know what they actually are.
You see, this one. I mean, this one's an interesting one because I haven't seen a lot about it on the news. I don't know whether they're just getting a bit bored with stuff like this. But this is genuinely interesting because of that. I want to see what it is. I mean, it could be well, it could be one of what did the Daily Sport have it once on the moon? It was a Lancaster bomber, wasn't it? So
Lancaster bomber. Or...
It could be an 18th century Welsh dresser with a mirror on.
It could be. Unlikely again, but it could be.
Right.
But like I say, I mean, I think the main thing is that it looks tremendously bright. So it looks like there's light actually being emitted from the surface, which is obviously why people are going, "Ooh, look at it." But it's because it's of the relative sort of reflectiveness of the surface. It appears sort of to be so much brighter than everything else. In itself, it's not emitting light. It's just the reflectivity is so much greater than the rest of the photo that it looks so bright. But like you say, the most likely thing is that it's some sort of recent collision. So it's fresh matter from under the surface, whereas everything else around it is sort of grey and dark and aged. Whereas this is highly reflective because it's fresh ice or something like that.
So to be just to be, this is just going to take photographs. It's not dropping any landers on or anything like that.
There's no lander, no. I think it's just got a camera and usual sort of instruments.
So when did you say that it was launched? How long ago was this launched?
It was 2007.
So reasonably good megapixel camera it should have on there then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, should be able to get some reasonably.
When you compared it with what you had with Rosetta, which was like, I think it was a 4 megapixel, but that was like 10 years ago or 10 years previously. So it might, you've got that extra bit of technology that's made up. So that might, hopefully, we should get some really quite sharp, high resolution pictures.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to find the specifications of the kit that it's got on. What's it got on it?
It was a Nikon D5000. I know, that's mine, sorry.
It's got 8 gigabytes of memory.
Oh.
Yeah, it's got a camera, a visible infrared spectrometer, a gamma and ray and neutron detector, and a memory chip containing the name of 360,000 space enthusiasts. There you are. So it's taken some names of it as well.
Why?
Right.
Just in case it gets intercepted.
Well, that's what I was first thing to think was if somebody goes, "What the bloody hell is this?" Oh, right. Yeah, I know now. Some little
memory chip. We know how to read that.
We know how to read that.
Like, that would mean that the civilization's come 99.99999% of the way. You'd think, might as well just come to Earth if you've made it that way.
Yeah, and they're sitting there looking at the memory chip and going, oh, bloody hell, FAT32, I've forgotten how to read this.
Let's go back.
I think, to be honest, I suspect most of these probes and missions and stuff will have that sort of thing on. I mean, the sort of thing that started with it was a Viking with the gold disc and the sounds and the picture of human beings and stuff. I suspect they do it with all probes. They'll put some sort of records on, even if it's just something to gain sort of like popularity of the mission before they go.
I think some of it is a PR thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A bit like Binary and Bit of the Moon and that sort of thing, but
Yes, indeed. But so do we know any compositional details of Ceres yet? Have we got any idea what we think it's made of, or?
I'm not sure. I mean, again, this is the first mission to there, so this
is all going to come out, I guess.
This is going to come out of this, yeah. That's what they'll be doing. They'll be trying to determine its internal structure and that sort. I'm just going to say, so Dawn will achieve two significant milestones: the first spacecraft to visit a dwarf planet, and to also orbit 2 extraterrestrial bodies. Because it did go around Vesta. Vesta was what it went round on 2011. So it went in July 2011, and it went to within 542 kilometers from the surface of Mars as well. So it's been around the houses a bit.
But it hasn't taken any photographs of anything else on its way there. It's just this was its sole purpose, and this is what.
I think this was its main purpose. I suspect it did take photos of Vesta and Mars when it went past, but that wasn't the main part of the mission. The main mission was to go to Ceres.
Cool. So, are we going to have any documentaries? Is there anything on the BBC about this? Like
I suspect,
or Discovery Channel or something like that?
I don't know. Like you say, it's not. I mean, it's been mentioned in the media recently, but not much has been said about it.
Let me just have a quick look and see if I can find something.
It was in the Guardian, and you know they have sort of like 8 science stories that come up on your mobile device. It was in there, so.
Yeah, but the Guardian is pretty good for stuff like that. I mean.
Yeah, that was in that science section as well.
Yeah.
Space.com have got some stuff on live webcasts of Ceres.
It was the main feature story, and that was from 2 days ago. So it's there 16 months.
Yeah, I guess it's just NASA TV that's got stuff on it, unfortunately, which is all right. I mean, but would have liked to have seen it. I know, for Rosetta. I mean, obviously it's a different thing, but Rosetta there was an hour-long documentary on it on the Discovery Channel, which was quite interesting. What we really need is a live feed of NASA TV on Sky and all the cable networks in the UK. That would be good. Full high def.
No, we're going to bet that it's ice, and might as well have a guess.
I'm going for the alien spaceports. One of these days.
Yeah, I'll go ice.
Well, Soup Dragon. Oh no, that was the moon, isn't it? That's Clangers. No. I don't know. I mean, it is because, like you say, it looks bright white, but it's only in comparison to a very dull grey. So it's probably not like that. It's just a different tonal variation. But
it is.
So it is. Planet. What is it? Is it an asteroid then?
Well, it's a dwarf planet.
Right.
So it's not an asteroid. Asteroids tend to not be large enough to have enough gravity to sort of make themselves round.
Because they're all squiggly.
Yeah. This is large enough to have its own. I don't know what you call it, but its own equilibrium.
Do you want to put the picture back up so we can have a little look at it again?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it does
classified the same as Pluto, basically.
Yeah, because Pluto's a dwarf planet now. Yeah.
Obviously that was a planet and then got reclassified, didn't it?
Yeah.
So what? I guess the distinction can be quite a moot point. It must be on a knife end between it. Because Pluto, for years, I mean, right throughout where I was learning about them in school and everything, Pluto was a planet.
Poor Pluto.
Yeah, I know.
Is the classification not to do with their own orbits clear of other objects, basically? So if they're large enough to move those up, something like that.
Exactly. So if it clears its own orbit and everything that is in its way has accreted into the object itself, that goes part of the way to defining a planet.
But if you look, I mean, if you look at that there,
the reason Pluto was downgraded was because we kept on finding so many other things that were bigger than it.
Yeah.
So it was sort of decided, okay, if we're that's a planet, these things have to be.
Size definitely matters. But I mean, if you look at that image there, sorry, I'll just talk a bit, Ross.
Sorry, yeah. So that one, that shows it, and you would look at that and you would say, well, that's or I don't know how big it compares to our moon actually. I assume it's a lot bigger, but obviously the moon's in orbit around us.
Yeah, I mean,
but it looks like a planet because it's round.
I'm sure it's about a tenth of the size of our moon. It's tiny.
Of the moon, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? And obviously, well, the moon, because it's in orbit around us, isn't considered any. It's not a planet.
And
it's a moon.
if you ask me, if you asked me about that, I would have said that looks like a similar makeup of our moon. It has the same pockmarked craters and everything on it.
Cratered structure.
It might very well have the same sort of like moon dust type surface, but those intriguing little. And it's not. I mean, that's a definite thing, because as it goes round multiple times, it's been photographs, and they're still there. They're definitely still there.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this sort of low resolution video that's playing now. When they first got this, they must have been thinking, what's going on there? Because it does look very odd. And it's very, very bright against the rest of it. So
I'm sure I had an animated GIF of that in 1999. Intriguing. So when do we? So it's in orbit now. When do we? When we get some data back? Do we know?
I'm not sure. Like I say, there's nothing coming back straight away, because obviously it's sort of overshot. It's gone into orbit, but it's sort of overshot, so it's going it'll be going away from it for a while. But once it settles down in the sort of the coming days and weeks, we'll then start getting data coming through.
Excellent. Well, that's one for probably next week. We'll probably know, and maybe we can follow it up later on in the program next week. But we'll leave it there, and we'll pop on to the next story, which is one from Richard. And this was covered, unlike the other one. This was covered in most of the media channels, and it was certainly on the breakfast, BBC Breakfast. And it's about being born when you're born, either in summer or in winter, and the intake in school, and how does it have disadvantages and advantages? I suppose, Richard.
Yeah. It's come up before. It's come up in 2003. It did the rounds then as well. Because the scientist, Professor Richard Wiseman, who went and seen Ross, can you remember when we went to see the monkey tour? He was actually the lead researcher on it last time round. I tweeted him to say, are you the same Richard Wiseman that did the research? And he tweeted us back to say yes. So I think it's come into the news this time because parents are saying, look, here the evidence is very strong. It's a disadvantage here for these children born late in the year, and the reason for it obviously is that if you're born in September, if you're born in the winter months, but September onwards, you could be potentially a year older than someone born end of August. So it's that, but it's also like the compound effect of that over time as well. So the reason it's in the news is just to do with the fact that councils have decided that no, you can hold them back the first year, but then they'll just be admitted when they get into mainstream school. They'll just be admitted at the same time. But I just found it interesting because obviously you can look at the data on this. So I was having a little look. So if you look at some of the better data from the United States, unfortunately, but in the United States, CEOs born in June, that's 6.13% of CEOs were born in June, compared to the population average of 8.16. So 8.16% of US births happen in June, but only 6.13% of CEOs are born in June. And then July is even worse. 8.75% of the US population was born in July, and only 5.87% of CEOs are born in July. So statistically, that's quite a big difference.
So it looks like if you've got a better head start if you're born in the sort of the winter time.
Yeah, just because of the way classrooms are structured. But if you look at sport, it's even worse. Malcolm Gladwell goes into this in his book Outliers, which I've read, which is a great book. I'd recommend it. But is
that on the reading list?
It isn't, but it's been out a while. I think it came out in like 2008. But it's definitely a recommend. If you look at football, it's even worse, because what happens there is they select and put people in more elite training. So if you do that, it's sort of age 9, and then you pick the best of them. The best of them are going to be the oldest ones, generally. And then if you promote them to get better training, you're going to compound that effect over time. So if you look at it, by the time they get to academy level, so 16 to 20, 57% of youngsters in academies in England were born in September, November or December, compared to 14% in June, July or August difference. So if you're born in June, July, or August, you almost may as well give up. The odds of that stacked against you. In the under-17s European Championship in 2009, 75% of the footballers were born in a 4-month window. So it just shows you. But the book goes into loads of interesting reasons that there's outliers and reasons for people's success, and he basically makes the point that a lot of it is to do with this outside of your own control, just the luck of when you're born. So not the month of the year thing, but he also does a really interesting thing about they compiled some research on the 75 richest people in history. So this is going all the way back to sort of Cleopatra and the pharaohs to now. So just looking at historical evidence in human history for extraordinary wealth. So 75 people in the list, 14 of them are Americans born within 9 years of each other in the mid-19th century. So out of 75, 20% of the list comes from a single generation in a single country. So it obviously shows you that it's circumstantial. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing really about those people because the chances of them being born in that time window is just remote. So it's obviously something about what was happening in the 19th century in America.
Which would be the whole Industrial Revolution and everything was taking off. So
but yeah, I'm kind of with the parents, to be honest. I sort of think you can see why the proposed solutions aren't great, because obviously if you hold people back a year, then the argument is that then parents, you're going to get a gap between rich and poor. Parents who can afford to keep their kids back a year, who have that luxury, it's going to create a gap between rich and poor. But I think Gladwell proposes that what we should do with football academies and classrooms and everything is, if you split it in half, you'll halve the problem. So if you have, if you split the year group into populations, then obviously you'll halve the problem, and a 6-month is significant, would be significantly less of a problem than a year gap. But yeah, it was just one that caught my interest. And like you say, I didn't really, other than looking at the interesting figures, there's nothing new about the story that had changed since 2004, since last time I did the rounds. But I just thought I would mention it.
Well, it's interesting enough. My wife was born in April, and she actually went to school for the first time after Easter. So, and I never knew there was an Easter intake. There certainly wasn't one at our school. So I don't know where that flies in. She's pretty intelligent.
So what's the best month to be born in then?
Well, in terms of academics, you're going to be, if you're born in September, and then obviously next would be October, and obviously the worst month would be August. So, winter, generally speaking, winter children have an advantage over summer children.
So apart from the idea of having like this split up into two, there's not really, and the idea of holding people back, there's not really another solution, is there?
Not really.
But isn't this just? Surely you can change that by coaching your child before they go to school and getting them more prepared. Surely, if everybody was starting and just saying, right, well, there's two intakes for all of the different months, and nobody coaches their child at all, so you've got a like a zero, and then you could probably take some stats off that, but if you coach your child and get them, certainly when I was growing up, my mother used to use flashcards for spelling and words and all numbers and stuff like that. Surely that then you even the disparity out.
But how though? Because if you're born in September and I'm born in August, and our parents both do that, you've still got 11 months advantage on me.
Yeah, but doesn't it even out towards the end of the,
the effect's obviously, well, this is the thing, the effect obviously, unless you compound it in some way. So this is the problem. If you then if you then test people and put them into sets and stuff like that, it compounds the problem. So if you then say, all right, at 12-year-old, we're going to test you, and whoever does the best in the test is then going to get better education from that point onwards by being in higher sets, you're going to compound the effect so that then the disparity between you and me becomes even larger. And that obviously bears out that by the time you get to being a CEO of a company, at whatever the average age of that is, say it's 45, then it's still massive. It's still making the difference of 8.75% of the population, but only 5.87% of CEOs. So even at that, even like you say, it's evening out, but not really. I mean, that's still a massive statistical difference, isn't it, at that age? So yeah, obviously when you're 4-year-old, the difference between a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old is obviously massive compared to the difference between a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old. But still, it just depends if you're going to do stuff like I say and put people into better sets in school. It's just going to compound the effect.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what we're saying is, don't have sex in the winter, although it's very cold when you really do need to have sex to warm up, to have a summer baby. unless you can wangle it so it's just September, but August is bad. But just no. But I mean,
obviously you're going to be like this. You're going to be the smallest kid as well, probably, and things like it has all sorts of effect. Like it'll have all sorts of psychological effects on you that perhaps you aren't aware of. That's obviously influenced to varying degrees. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all. Of course, 5.87% of CEOs are still born in July. It's not saying if you're born in July you're screwed, but your back's against the wall compared to someone born in the winter months. Like I say, if it's something like football, if you're born in outside of that 4-month window, you might as well forget about it, because you're really, really going to have to somehow make up that difference. If 75% of people are born in a 4-month period, if you're the other end of the year and you're in the 5%, you've got virtually no chance. It's something that's already highly competitive, and then the odds are being stacked against you for no fault of your own. But the thing that we should worry about as a society is we're missing huge pools of, contributors there. If you look at the football thing, all that tells you is that if England uses that mechanism and somewhere abroad doesn't, we're missing out on a huge amount of talent of footballers who are born outside that window, where we're just saying, don't select those.
Well, here's one. Alan Shearer was born in August.
Well, I don't know but the window is not the same for academia and football, though.
Ah, right, okay.
I don't know what the 4-month time is actually for football, but it obviously depends on when they make their selections. So I don't know. But I did have a quick look at the England team, and it was there seemed to be more winter, but I didn't do the full analysis, so I'm not sure. But 75% at under 17 in a 4-month window. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it?
Well, as you're the only one of the three of us who's actually got children, and will that affect your decisions? Will you try to be pushing to make sure that your children will be going into the right, say in quotes, the right intake?
Well, Sam's December, so he'll be one of the older children in his year, so he'll be okay. Yeah. Zach's May, which is kind of like towards the end of the year, but still, compared to me, I'm 30th of July, so I was like sort of within 30 days of the youngest in the year.
But it hasn't affected you at all. I mean, you're a very, you've got eloquent, cognitive.
I don't know, how can you say that though? You can't. You know what I mean?
You should be so much more intelligent.
Yeah, exactly. You could still be more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you might be falling foul of a logical fallacy there, thinking, well, yeah, of course some people make it, but the point is that so many more people who are born in winter make it. That's kind of the point.
Mm.
It's not saying like it's not fatalistic. It's not saying you're doomed. It's just saying, look.
Well, it sounds like it's what you're saying.
You did say they might as well not bother.
Yeah, you did.
the
it's not
football,
fatalistic, but quite frankly, just give up.
well, for the football one, I mean,
Do we know if the suicide rate's higher in that gap as well?
yeah, I wonder. Well, it probably would correlate. I'm guessing it will.
Well, I was going to be a footballer, but I listened to Richard, and quite frankly, I'm just going to kill myself.
Yeah. But
Excellent. Right. Well, so statistics. It's all about statistics. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Right. Well, it's time is pushing on, so let's go to the last little topic of the evening, and this one is mine actually. A completely unprepared, or very little preparation in this one, but it basically revolves around a story which I have found buried away, and it's about. Generically, it's about open source software and people not being, let's just say, not abiding by the rules of open source software. So, first off, I think before I go into the actual story, I'll give everybody a sort of a brief overview of open source software. Some people, even in IT, don't really know what open source software. They concentrate on the fact that it's free software, as in I have not paid for it, I can use it. But there's really two levels of free, and I mean there's the French word gratis and the French word libre, and Richard Stallman, who's the leader of the Free Software Foundation. There's basically two luminaries in open source software. One's Richard Stallman. One's Eric Redman, and they're both leading lights of different organisations involved with open source software. But Richard Stallman, he basically says there's two things: software is open source software is free, as in free beer, or free as in free speech, and you've got to have both of those to have an open source product. Now, Eric Redman, who's I think he's a lifelong sort of leader of the Open Source Initiative, and they are basically an organisation which ratifies open source licensing. So they say, yes, this is a true open source license, or this isn't. They basically have a list of, I think there's about 9 points, 10 points actually, of what software what a license needs to be in order to be a proper open source license, and they include things like there's a free redistribution point about this shall not restrict any party from selling or giving away the software. There's a thing about the source code, that the program must include source code. If it doesn't include the source code, it must be in a well-publicized means of obtaining it, so a download or something like that. There's a whole section on derived works about how a license must allow modifications in derived works, must be distributed under the same as the license of the original. Things about that, integrity of author's source code. And then there's a whole section on discrimination, or not discriminating against a particular set of people. So you can't discriminate. The software that's released under the license can't discriminate under any person or group of people. It mustn't discriminate on any field of endeavor. So you can't release a piece of software and still hope it to be a genuine open source license and say, but we can't use it in the nuclear field, or you can't use it in genetic engineering. All of those things. So the true open source license has to meet many of those criteria. Now, there is the main licenses under there are things like the Apache license and the BSD license, and I know you, Ross, you were saying about the MIT one.
Yeah.
But they're all slightly different, because there's this other concept that comes into play, which is copyleft, which is another one of Richard Stallman's words that he invented. And the GPL, which is by far the widest open source licensing policy, is a genuine copyleft license. And by copyleft, what I mean is that if you modify a GPL piece of software, then it must also be a GPL piece of software. If you include that GPL software into another piece of software, that becomes also under the GPL. So that's what it means by copyleft. So it continues the freedom down the line. Now, we're coming on to the actual crux of this story now. Now I've given you all this background. And it involves a big player in IT, and that's VMware. Now, VMware are, I would say, the market leader in virtualization. Would you agree, Richard?
Yeah.
I defer to Richard because he is a VCP, so he's got that qualification. He is head and shoulders about everybody else here about virtualization. And what the whole core of the story is revolves around a guy called Christoph Hellwig, and he's a German, and he is one of the main contributors to the Linux kernel. He basically is the 18th most active contributor over the period since 2005. So, and to be a Linux kernel contributor, Linus Torvalds, you know, he's got a very short fuse. If your code is not up to it, you're out. So, to be a contributor for that long means that he's a very good coder. He knows what he's talking about. Now, what he's saying is, and he's saying that the ESXi hypervisor that VMware released, and it's part of their vSphere product line, and they've got their kernel called VM kernel actually has parts of his Linux kernel embedded into it, which is fair enough. That's okay, providing that they adhere to the GPL license. So essentially, what should happen, because it's a copyleft license, is I'll nick something. Well, not nick. Sorry, I used a bad word. I will take something from the Linux kernel, and I'll use it in this new kernel, but that new kernel must be GPL. Except that VMware, the VM kernel, is not. It's proprietary. So what he's saying is, some of my code that I contributed to the Linux kernel, you have essentially stolen, put in your proprietary work, and you haven't released the source code for it. And this is what he's doing, and he's made this assertion on a number of occasions since 2007. But he's got to the stage now where the VMware are just not talking to him anymore. So he's basically.
So have they denied it?
They have said yes. Well, they have denied it.
So there's a suit. Is there an active suit on this then, or is it not?
There is an active suit in Germany, because he is German, and it's very hard to bring like a worldwide suit. So you'll bring it out in the country that they are selling that product in, which in this case is in Hamburg.
Well, you're definitely more likely to win that kind of suit in Europe than you are in the States.
You are definitely. So basically, basically VMware have said in the past, their legal counsel has said last year that VMware had no intention of ceasing their distribution of proprietary licensed works derived from Hellwig's and other kernel developers' copyrights, despite the terms of the GPL.
All right, so they've admitted it, but they're not going to.
Well, yeah, that's what legal counsel said. What they have said now is that they believe that the lawsuit is without merit, and that they look forward to prevailing on all issues through the judicial process in Germany. They're basically saying that VMware is an active participant and a long-standing commitment to the free and open source software community, and they have got a hell of a lot of software from the open source community, and basically they're saying, oh no, we're all right, we're good guys.
So it's going to come down to a legal interpretation of what that means then, I guess.
It is going to come legal interpretation. But, so the question that I was going to ask, specifically Ross in this case, was, have you ever been in a situation where you could have nicked some, plagiarized some code, possibly open source code, and put it into your work and then made it proprietary? Have you ever done it? Have you ever considered it? What's your view on it?
I've never done it because I've never really worked on anything proprietary as such. I mean, in my previous job, we built a CMS, but it was technically open source. You know, we used it we didn't promote it as open source. We didn't distribute it anywhere. But if we had a client who used it and they wanted to continue using it and develop it themselves, they could. They had the source code. It wasn't a compiled thing. So I've not really been involved in working with anything that's sort of closed source. But I've used open source plugins, plenty. Like I mentioned before, the MIT license is what they're under, which, as far as my interpretation of it, says that as long as you keep that license in the software, you can do what you want with it.
Because MIT, like as I described, MIT isn't a copyleft license.
No.
So you don't have to make any derivatives
Make
also
more.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, I suppose it's a difficult one because obviously a lot of developers and coders will seek solutions that other people have done to problems and use from snippets of code to libraries to full blocks of code. So I imagine it's something that does actually happen quite a lot. Possibly inadvertently. I suspect there may be places where something will have been included and no one's even considered what the licensing is.
Well, you know, last year when when I did that Annus Horribilis of computing security, which is in the previous vodcast before Christmas, and I said, well, you know, we had a lot of problem with OpenSSL this year, and then at the end of the year, Windows had a problem with S-Channel, which is their implementation of SSL, and I did postulate that perhaps there might be some OpenSSL code somewhere in there. Now, I'm just wondering if it's a bigger thing than we think, because of course, if you make a proprietary piece of software, anybody who is involved in looking at the code is under extreme NDAs. So, you know, if their business is on the line, they're not going to go put their head above the parapet and go, there's some dodgy code in here, which I think I've seen somewhere else, and it's probably in a bit of GPL work.
So in terms of this particular gentleman bringing up his case, how does he know? Or is it just that he has evidence to suggest it is? Because unless he's seen the actual source code, he can't prove it, can he?
It's interesting on that, because nowhere on there does he say how he knows, but to get to the stage where lawyers are involved, one would assume that he has some evidence. Now, obviously, he's not going to give it out before the actual case, if he can show it. But there's nothing in any of the articles that I've read to say that. I
mean, VMware share it with partners because they're part of, they're part of a, what would you describe it as? A standard that they share with Cisco for the FlexPod. So they do share that code base is not open source, but obviously it is shared with other people, so perhaps he's may be able to get it that way. I mean, they've disclosed it to people at some point, so that information will be out there.
Yeah, if he's actually got a copy of the source code, he probably couldn't say he had, because that in itself is probably going to land him in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that this has probably been going on since 2013, and the organisation that he's involved with bringing this lawsuit is called what's it called? I did have it. Damn. The Software Freedom Conservancy. And basically, I think there must be just a pot of money for bringing these type of litigations to court. But again, he doesn't tell you how.
Has there been any other sort of similar cases before? Is this sort of like the largest one for open source versus proprietary?
There's all sorts of little ones across the world. There used to be a site called Grocklaw, which closed down a while ago because of various things that happened after oh God, what's his name? The guy who's currently in an embassy in London. Snowden. Yeah, I think there was some. Grocklaw used to be a great site of genuine open source people who were also lawyers, so they could give the technical spin and the legal spin on it, and really useful. They closed down because they said it was in an atmosphere where they didn't think they could work. But over there, there's been lots of little ones. But this is probably one of the main ones. I've never seen anything. If this is true, if this is found to be true, this would be big. This would mean that essentially VMware couldn't ship ESXi, and that's basically their entire product range would cease to exist.
So would they? Do you think they would turn around and just go, okay, here it is, open source, or would that destroy their business as well?
Oh, no, yeah, you couldn't do that. I mean, to be fair, there's one virtualization platform that has done that, and that's Zen. Zen, the kernel has always been open source, but a lot of the stuff around it, all the niceness and the prettiness and the user friendliness, was owned by Citrix. But a couple of years ago, Citrix just open sourced a lot. So, and I've got on my blog, I've got lots of investigations into Zen, because it is now open source, and I don't have to, free as in beer. I didn't have to pay for it, and free as in freedom, because the source code is now available, and I could, if I was so wished and I understood what the hell it was doing, I could download that and recompile it for my own means. But that is all GPL'd, so that is an official right the way through, and it works. But I suspect that we're not. This won't be the only one. I suspect
they'll have to either win the case. I mean, they're not going to open source it because VMware are $8 billion subsidiary of EMC.
Yeah.
So they're going to fight that, but they're either going to lose and have to pay him some kind of royalties.
But it's not really for him. It would, because it's in the GPL. It would be. I don't know where the money would go actually.
But ultimately, they'd have to pay damages of some description, wouldn't it? It's not going to stop them selling VMware. I mean, they just have to pay. It
potentially could.
You think?
Could it just stop them selling it in Germany, and that would be it?
Yeah. Well, that might be it, yeah. But the GPL is a worldwide legislative legal document.
If there was a precedent set in Germany,
so it may be that other people would have to bring the case in every subsequent country that VMware are selling their product.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. It's definitely, I think, SCO. The Santa Cruz organization had some various things that they were saying that had some bits of Linux in there involved. In the end, SCO just went out of business. They had this long-running court action. In the end, SCO was just there, just basically bring counter-actions against people for suing them. So. It's quite possible. I mean, SCO were never a huge organization, but they certainly had some reasonable amount of Unix customers for their SCO Unix. So it could go down that road. I suspect it may not, but we won't know until the sort of the outcome of the court cases, and we'll keep you updated as what's happening. Well, look at the time, everybody. It's 20:49. That must mean it's time to wrap up for this evening. As ever, if you've enjoyed it, and we certainly have, if you've enjoyed it, please email us and email us on the email address wonderofstuff@gmail.com, or you can go and visit us and leave comments and everything. But we do moderate them, so nothing rude. wonderofstuff.blogspot.com is our blog, and Richard this week has started putting on reading lists of useful books, and I'll go in there and put mine on, and I think Ross, you have to do yours as well. All the show notes will be on there as well, with links to relevant parts, and lots of stuff. When we get time, we will be adding to that. So there's all ways of getting in touch with us. We'll be here again next week, same time, same channel. And until then, I think it's about time that we say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.